So today we're back in the form creator. This is the third part in this video series, so make sure if you just happen to land on this training, go back and see the other form creator training first, so this really won't make sense. In fact, I'm going to start off right in my form that I already created in those other meetings. So again, go back and watch those previous trainings. In those trainings, I created this form, and this was just a sample form. But today we're going to go a little bit further. It's still not advanced type of things, but different types of fields you can add and things you could do. So one thing is going to be like adding a drop-down. So we're going to add a drop-down. A drop-down is a list of items that that user, which would be the applicant, can choose from in a selection you provided them. Drop-downs are nice if you have a defined list. So that way you're not getting, everybody free typing. They could type the same thing in four different applications and really mean the same thing, but if they've all typed it out differently, it just makes it more uniform. Of course, some situations you won't be able to use a drop-down. A free form text is appropriate in a lot of situations too. But this, again, just makes it uniform. So I'm going to show you a drop-down. I'm also going to show you, I have a lot of questions with how do I create a hyperlink in my form. Like in my form instructions, I want a hyperlink that maybe takes them to a website or that opens a document with maybe further instructions or, pictures or something that helps them walk through this or something like that. I have that all the time. That's actually HTML coding. We do not teach HTML coding. I kind of went over this before. You can use it. Make sure you end your coding. The system's already HTML coding. Some people like to bold their text, or maybe in the instructions they want to put a bulleted list or something like that. You can. In fact, you can just go out and do a search on the internet and type in how do I bold my text using HTML coding, and it'll show you what you need. It's just really important to remember to end your coding. So I'm going to show you the document repository. I'm going to add a document to the document repository and then create a link in the form that you can click on and opens that document. You can also use the same HTML coding for a hyperlink to a different URL. So just a couple little extra things in the form creator we didn't get to cover in our other training meeting. So again, I'm looking at this form. So if we preview it, it looks, it was the form we did it before. In fact, there's HTML coding up here. And I'm going to add a dropdown. So in my single value up here, I'm going to add a dropdown that they can choose to select from. In fact, I'm going to get a little advanced with my dropdown and create a reference table. You don't ever have to use a reference table unless you have a very specific need, but it is kind of neat. It's basically like a nested dropdown. You can have two dropdowns that connect to each other. So as you select from the first one, it will work down the other choices in the second one. And it'll probably make more sense when I show it to you. So I'm going to do a dropdown, document repository, hyperlink in the instructions today, and a reference table. So in here, this may seem a little silly, but I'm going to ask the applicant in here what their favorite color is. This is just a good example I can lead into a reference table with. This is probably not a realistic question you would ask on an application, but we're going to run with this. So my question and my single value is going to be favorite color. Now, I could let them type it in, right? This could be a text box. Again, free form, you might have, a million different versions of yellow that they would type in instead of just using the word yellow. If we want to make it all formatted and I want to actually say, red, blue, yellow, green, and so on, I'm going to make a drop down. So usually it's better to create the drop down first, because now I'm going to go to say this is a drop down field and I don't actually have the drop down list yet. So I have to come back in and define it. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, and I'll come back in after I've created that drop down. So my field is here, my question, and it's a data type drop down. And as of right now, it's blank. I haven't associated a drop down with it. Next is creating the actual drop down. So I'm going to go utilities, drop down lists. Within here, depending on your access, you'll see all the user-defined drop-downs that already exist in the system. And I will say, if it already exists, there's no need to recreate it. If it's a global dropdown, you can use it. You should just be very careful editing a global dropdown. You will be impacting whoever else is using it. There is a way to come in here and see where it's used. Definitely do that if you're going to edit the existing dropdown or add to it. This is kind of the same rules as in the form creator. If this is in use and you can see that it's been used, don't delete. Definitely don't delete, the items in the dropdown list. What's really nice is you can use a dropdown list year after year, even if the options change. You could archive them. So if this is no longer available to select in your applications, you could come in and archive it. Archiving is great because it leaves it wherever it was already used. And so if someone had selected this option in their form before, it will still show. But it's not going to be an option in future forms. So if this is on an application form, a future application would not even see this as an option. And again, it's just as easy to unarchive something if you need it back. So archive, preserve your data, and again, adding is always okay. So now if you want to add an option, just go make sure, because this happens to be a global dropdown, if you're adding an option, go see where it's used to make sure that's going to be okay for whoever else is using this too. That's where, if it's not, and you really have to make this a little bit different, you would then go create your own unique dropdown and probably associate it to your own program and have a program-specific dropdown. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to create a brand new dropdown. I'm going to back out of this one, and I'm going to click Add. And this one's going to be really simple. I'm going to say primary colors. This is truly the dropdown list name. Nobody will see this but you. Like the applicant's not going to see the name of the dropdown. But you may have a lot of similar dropdowns in your system, so the description should be, a good description to indicate what that is, especially to come back and edit it later. When you go to the actual form, this is the name that you'll see when you're selecting. So this is just helpful text for me, and I'm going to make this program specific. It's not going to be global. Okay, an important thing here when you're creating dropdowns is if you've made the dropdown program specific, you don't have to make each item in the dropdown program specific. In fact, that's a very advanced dropdown. So you either make it global or program specific. When you actually start adding the items in this dropdown, in this case, my items would be red, yellow, and blue, which I'm going to add in the next step. Those items don't need to be program specific because the entire dropdown already is. So really, it's the dropdown list itself. So when I click Save, now I actually have created a dropdown list, but it's completely blank. So now I'm going to add my options. And there's really no limit here on how many options you can have in a dropdown. But I'm going to add 3. So again, this is kind of like the form creator. You want to keep your code short and sweet. That's how it's stored in the database. You don't want special characters. Now this one does happen to allow spaces. So if you do have like a sentence in your label, you can have spaces in your code, but not special characters. I do want to note here though, you can't change your code later, and this is how you will use conditional logic, and a lot of times dropdowns will drive conditional logic. If you select a certain option in a dropdown, then it triggers another question to pop up. You actually use the code when you do that conditional logic. So I always recommend, just like your database field name in a form, keep it short and sweet. Mine will be anyway. I don't have a whole sentence. Mine are just simple colors, so mine are going to be really easy. Value is advanced, but if you want a particular option to be a value, and then you're going to calculate that on your form, you can give it a value. If I'm not going to do a calculation, it doesn't make sense to give it a value at all. An example here of where you would use a value, where I see it used most often, is in a review form. If they would say, have a question for the reviewer, excellent, maybe mediocre, or horrible, you could You could say horrible is equal to 0, mediocre is equal to 3, and excellent is 5, or something like that. And then it would total up to like the score. So that was just an example, but you can get advanced. Again, that's advanced form creation and calculation. So we're not going to do that. Once again, this program area here is per item. That's extremely advanced. That's taking a global dropdown and then making individual items program specific. And it really doesn't make sense unless you have implemented like a global form that every program is going to use. And in that form, there's a dropdown and only specific items pertain to different programs. It gets really complicated. It's kind of a hard dropdown to manage. Mostly, this is used by system dropdowns. So if you think about it in a system perspective, there's system dropdowns that you can't see. Things like the statuses, editing, correcting, submitted, those are dropdowns. There are system dropdowns all over that the system uses that are defaults that you can't change. But one of those, just to throw out an example, is the status report types. In the entire system, you might have a global dropdown that has quarterly, final, annual, semi-annual, monthly. So like many different status report types. But within your program, maybe you only see quarterly and final. Well, that's because it's a global dropdown and each item is set per program. So it's really more applicable to your system type dropdowns. When you get into your own dropdowns and you're creating it for your form, if it's a pretty vague dropdown like yes, no, not applicable, I see that on almost every system where you've added a yes, a no, and then a not applicable. And those are your drop-down choices. A lot of people do that for conditional logic to, pop up another question if yes or something like that. That's pretty vague. Anybody could use that in the program. You could make that global. But when you're creating your drop-down, look at what you're actually creating. If it's very program specific, where you can, look at that and go, yeah, that really wouldn't apply to any other program there. They're not going to use this. Then make it specific to your program at the drop-down level itself, not per item. This causes a lot of confusion for people. It does default to all. But remember, it's program specific already, so that's fine. Just leave each item set to all. Okay, language, we're going to leave it set to default of English, and I already talked about archived. So it took me a while to talk through that, but really it's just as simple as doing the code and the label. So watch how fast I can do the next one. I'm going to click add, type in my code and label. Okay, so I have a drop-down now with 3 options. So I would have created my drop-down first and then went back to the form and added my field. I already have a field in there, so I'm just going to simply associate this drop-down to that field. So favorite color, what drop-down? Here I'm going to say, okay, here's what drop-down do you want to use? And then I have a couple options over here I'm going to talk about. So here, these, when you have a long list like this can be kind of hard to search through when it's really large. This is just a special note here. You can type in this box. So if you know what you named it, you can just type and it'll eliminate down for you. It's a lot easier to find. That type of search is throughout the system. You'll see that in a lot of places. So I said, okay, my data type is a dropdown. And this is the dropdown list I created, and that's the one I want to use. Okay, these 2 options, include blank choice. Include blank choice is like for a single select, so they can't select multiples items, but it's a single select and you're making them stop and think. If you don't include a blank choice, then it's going to default to the first option in the list, and that means it's already pre-filled for them. So they don't have to stop and think and answer the question. So most of the time, you're going to want to do one or the other of these. You don't leave them blank like this unless you very specifically want it to automatically default. And I'll show you all 3 ways so this makes a little sense. But most of the time, single select, include blank choice like that. And then whether or not you want it required. Now this drop-down list type here truly just It makes it look different. So it's, again, goes back to preference and what you like. I personally prefer classic select. Some people love select search. It's just the way the drop-down box appears. It does not impact the actual data. So again, this is preference on the type that you like and how you like it displayed. So I'm going to go ahead and show you in a preview what this looks like. It's a single select with a blank choice. So when I click save, and now I preview this, and now I've got the question favorite color, and it's blank, which means when the applicant goes to like mark this as complete, if they didn't fill it out, it's going to make them go back and fill it out. And I have to actually click on that. I have to stop and think, and then choose my selection. Well, if I would have neither of them selected like this, it's going to default to the first in the box, which is sometimes preferred. So think about it this way. On your registration page, whatever state you're in is automatically defaulted and it appears for them. So I'm going to go ahead and log out on a different screen and click register. This state drop-down box here, it's nothing more than a drop-down without a blank choice on there. That's it. So you can make it in a situation where, all your applicants, or, the majority, if not all, will be within your state. You can default it to that option. That way they have the ability to change it if it's different, but it defaults for them. This is where you really don't want them to stop and think, the state is pretty obvious for your applicants. It's all pretty much the same, right? But in a case where I'm asking them a specific question, I want them to stop and think and actually select an answer like this. Or this is a drop down that has a blank choice there, and I have to stop and think about that. Okay, so that's the difference between those two. Both of those options, though, were single select, meaning the applicant's not going to be allowed to select more than one option. So now, what if it's like we're asking about different things they're going to do on their project, and there's different items, and they can do more than one? Well, then that's a multi-select dropdown. So multi-select, and I prefer when I do multi-select to do this multi-select drop-down type there. And if I preview this, it's going to list like this. And if you had a long box, that's why there's a blank space on the bottom. It would just show it all, and then there's a scroll bar. But this allows them to control click or shift and do all, and they can select multiple options. So you really have to think about the question you're asking and what you want to allow. I'm going to go ahead and change this back to a single select with a blank choice. That's pretty standard. Next, I'm going to get a little advanced with this dropdown and do a reference table. That's like a nested dropdown where my second dropdown would have this long list of items, but it's going to narrow down based on the dropdown selection I made in the first one. So first, you actually have to create your second dropdown. Creating the reference table really isn't that difficult. Your dropdowns just have to exist already. So I've actually got the dropdown created already, and I just called it more defined colors. So to show you, you saw the primary, and then I added some different variations of those colors. Again, this is just a funny example. But I want to narrow this down, like pink and maroon should only belong if they selected red. So I'm going to narrow this down, but these are just two simple drop downs. They're not connected yet. A lot of times I recommend that if you are doing a reference table, you actually put that in the name. It helps to find them later, but you could say, this is the child. And then I could go call my primary colors the parent. You don't have to do that. It's just nice to be able to locate them a little bit quicker. So I have my drop downs created, and now I want to nest them together, which is a reference table. So that's again in utilities, reference tables, click add, and then you just pick your parent and your child. Just that simple. So you do have to have them created first. So I know my parent is my primary. So I'm again going to type in this box, and it'll narrow it down for me. So primary, and then I'm going to do my other my more defined colors. So once I do that, I click save. And then from here, it's really easy. You just go, okay, here's a child. What parent belongs to it? Right, so pink, I go to red, red. And we're changing here, going yellow, yellow, teal would be blue, and so on. And again, this is just an example, but it's nice. If you have one, like maybe orange would be a good example here, that orange could maybe belong to red or yellow. You can do both. So then if they selected red, this would show up. If they selected yellow, it would also show up. So you can do a multi-select in here. I'm going to do a single for each one. Click save and it immediately creates that. And now it exists as a reference table. So I've just connected those two drop-downs. That's really all I did. How you make it work is you just add the second field. So as long as it sees the two drop-downs together on this section, it'll automatically connect them. So I can still use them singularly, like the fact that this primary color drop-down has a reference table is if I don't use the secondary colors, it's not going to impact this. I can still just use each drop-down singularly by itself, and it's not going to hurt. But as soon as I add that second one, it'll automatically go, oh, there's a reference table, and it's going to connect them. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to come in here, and then I'm going to ask the question to narrow it down. So be more specific. Again, I'm being creative here. A lot of times this is based on like project type. You'll have a project type, maybe 3 main categories. And then underneath those categories, there's, subtypes. That's generally where you see a reference table. You wouldn't really be wanting to know what your applicant's favorite color was. But again, this is just a good, easy example to show you. So say more specific color. And again, this is another drop-down. I don't have to specify that it's a reference table or anything like that. I just have to make sure both drop-downs are in the same section and they're automatically going to work. Okay, again, I'm going to do single select. Now let's preview and see how this looks. So when I preview, if I look at my second drop-down here, it's the entire listing of colors. But as soon as they start choosing from the first, it narrows it down to that reference table. So it's a pretty cool feature. I have this set to a multi-list type still. Let me go change that. And change that first one back to classic. Okay, now it'll make a little bit more sense. So red, yellow, there we go, blue. So pretty neat feature. Again, you may not ever have to use that on your forms, but if you do have like things that need to narrow down, like a project type is a really good example, this is a great feature you can use. Again, it's called a reference table. The last thing for this video, I want to talk about the document repository. So the document repository itself is an internal only function. Your external users can't get there. A lot of people will store their manuals there, and you can attach those manuals to the funding opportunity so that the applicant or the grantee can see that document and it's stored in the system. But the majority of the time you'll use the document repository to add an attachment that you want to hyperlink to, mostly in your form instructions. You'll want to put a hyperlink to where the applicant can click on it, and then it pops open a document. You would have to store that document within the system in the document repository. You can use the same HTML coding to pop up a hyperlink for a different URL. A lot of people have a different, their actual website with more details. You can take them there and say, click here for, an example of this, and it'll actually open this document or this website up. So I'm going to go ahead and go into Utilities, Document Repository. I've already added the PDF I want to use here, but it's simple. You just add, select the attachment, name it, name the file type. Once you click save, it'll be in this listing here. So I've already got my PDF. I'm going to click view file, and that's going to open it, and it has this URL for this file, and that's what you actually want to use is that URL. So I've also got a website pulled up, and I'm going to use the same coding for. Okay, so we're going to go back to my form. So same old form that I've been using. I'm going to go to the form creator and find my form here. Let's say I want to open that document maybe in my section instructions. I'm going to go ahead and get into the section properties. You can see I already have some instructions in here. So I'm going to go ahead and add, and I will add this to the video file too, so you can actually see what I'm using and don't have to copy it from the screen. But I've got this kind of cheat in here that says here, and then link address goes here, or link goes here, just to kind of help. Let me blow my screen up. It'll make it look a little weird, but that way you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so this is the end. I'm ending it, right? And this is going to create the link. So I can do two different things. I'll do it in two different areas so we can see what this looks like. But the link goes here. That's that URL. And then this is what they're actually going to click on. So these are the words, hyperlink. So most of the time, why it says here is most of the time people will say click here, and the word here will be blue as a blue hyperlink, but you can really make it say anything you want it to say. So now I have to go get that link and put it here. Make sure you leave those quotations around or it won't work. So the first one was the document repository. I've added already. I clicked view file. So now I'm going to just take this and I'm going to copy it, go back to my form and paste it. Okay, so it might be large like that one is. And then I'm going to click save. Let's see what that looks like. That was in my section instructions here. So see how this is now a hyperlink. If I click on that, it opens that document in a new tab for me. So same process. I'm going to go ahead and do it and I'll put it above my field in my field instructions. But same coding. So I want to put it above the favorite color. I'm going to scroll down again to instructions. Paste in the same HTML coding. But this time I could say click, and then it'll say here, and here will be what you click on. And now I'm going to take them to a website. So again, you just go get that URL, put it in the link goes here portion. Click save. Now if I preview that, it says click here and takes me to that website. And I still have my original tab open. You want to pop them out to a new tab so it doesn't take them out completely of WebGrants where they may not have saved their form. Okay, so we got a little advanced there, but that is just some extra things you can do within your standard form. Again, be looking for our advanced form creation and budget form creation videos coming soon. Thank you for watching.